When my son left, the server said to me in a panic, "I saw him put something in your drink." So I've replayed that moment 1,000 times in my head. The way the glass trembled in my hand. The way her voice cracked when she leaned toward me. The way my son didn't look back as he walked out of the restaurant. "If you care about yourself," she whispered, breath unsteady, "don't drink that." I saw him put something in it. And just like that, 26 years of fatherhood shattered into a silence so loud I could barely hear my own heartbeat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That evening was supposed to mean something. My son Daniel had called me 3 days earlier, which, in itself, was unusual. We hadn't been distant exactly, but life had shifted between us over the years. After his mother passed, something in him changed. Something in both of us did. Still, when he said, "Dad, let's have dinner. Just you and me," I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. We used to be inseparable when he was little. Saturday mornings were ours, pancakes slightly burnt because he insisted on flipping them himself, cartoons playing too loudly in the background. He'd sit at the kitchen counter swinging his legs, asking endless questions about the world. "Do you think the moon feels lonely?" he once asked me when he was 7. I told him no. I said the moon watches over everyone. That it's never alone. Back then, he believed everything I said. As he grew older, things became more complicated. Teen years, quiet phases, locked doors, but we never stopped talking. Not fully. I made sure of that. Or at least, I thought I did. So when he invited me out to dinner, I ironed my shirt twice. The restaurant wasn't overly fancy, but it wasn't casual either. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of place that tries very hard to feel intimate. He was already there when I arrived, seated near the window. He stood up when he saw me. That caught me off guard. "Hey, Dad," he said, smiling. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real enough to warm something inside my chest. We hugged, briefly. He smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Some new cologne maybe. Something sharper than he used to wear. "You look good," I told him. "You too," he replied, though his eyes flickered past me for half a second, like he was checking something behind my shoulder. I noticed it. I told myself not to. "We ordered drinks first," he insisted. "My treat tonight," he said quickly when I reached for my wallet. That was another small surprise. Daniel had always been generous in spirit, but money had been tight for him recently. I knew that. He'd mentioned a new business idea, something online, something he said would change everything. I'd offered help, but he refused. "I want to do this on my own." I respected that. When the drinks arrived, he watched the server set them down. I remember thinking it was polite of him, attentive, even. We started talking about simple things at first. Work, traffic, a mutual friend from years ago who'd moved away. His answers were smooth, but there was something measured about them. Like he'd practiced casualness. At one point, I asked, "Are you okay, Daniel?" He laughed softly. "Why wouldn't I be?" "I don't know," I admitted. "You just seem somewhere else." He held my gaze for a moment too long. "I'm right here, Dad." And for a second, I believed him. Dinner came. We shared an appetizer like we used to when he was a teenager and could never decide what he wanted. He even made an old joke about how I used to pretend I didn't like fries so he could have mine. "You always knew I loved them," he said. I smiled. Of course I did, but there were pauses between our words. Small gaps where something unsaid hovered in the air. Twice, he checked his phone under the table. Subtle, quick, but I saw the screen light up against his shirt. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just a notification." He turned the phone face down after that. Halfway through the meal, he excused himself to take a call. Said it was important. I watched him walk toward the entrance, his shoulders slightly tense. He didn't step outside completely, just near the doorway. I could see him through the reflection in the window. He wasn't speaking much, mostly listening. Then he glanced at me. Not the kind of glance you give someone you love across a room. It was quick, assessing. He came back a minute later, smile restored. "Sorry about that." "No problem." He reached for his glass, took a sip, then set it down. His fingers tapped lightly against the table, a rhythm that didn't match the calm tone of his voice. "You ever think about moving somewhere smaller?" he asked suddenly. "Smaller? Yeah, downsizing. Less stress." I chuckled. "I like my house. It's just big for one person." I shrugged. "It holds memories." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, memories. When he stood up again, it was near the end of the meal. Bathroom, he said casually. I watched him walk away. And that's when she appeared. The server. She approached the table carefully, eyes darting toward the hallway. Daniel had disappeared down. Sir, she said quietly, leaning in close. I need you to listen to me. And please don't react. My stomach tightened. What is it? Her hands were shaking. When your son got up the first time, he came over to the service station. He said he spilled something and needed napkins. I frowned. Okay. He was holding a small packet. I thought it was sugar. But I saw him open it. The world around me began to blur at the edges. And when he walked back to your table, she continued, her voice barely audible now, I saw him drop something into your drink. Silence swallowed everything. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. But when he left just now, I had to tell you. Please, don't drink it. My hand was still wrapped around the glass. Cold condensation against my palm. Across the room, I could see Daniel returning down the hallway. Walking toward me, toward the table, toward whatever this moment was about to become. And I realized, I had no idea who my son truly was anymore. I slowly lifted the glass from the table. And just before he reached his chair, I made a decision. When my son left, the server said to me in a panic, I saw him put something in your drink. So I didn't drink it, but I didn't put it down either. I lifted the glass slowly, as if nothing had changed. As if my world hadn't just tilted off its axis. Daniel was only a few steps away now, his expression calm, too calm. I brought the rim close to my lips. And then I paused. Actually, I said lightly, setting it back down, I think I've had enough for tonight. He froze for half a second before sitting down. You barely touched it, not as thirsty as I thought. His eyes flickered to the glass. Then back to me. That was the first moment I saw it, not guilt, not fear. Calculation. The server moved past us again, deliberately avoiding eye contact now. I could feel Daniel's attention sharpening. You okay, Dad? He asked. Why wouldn't I be? The same question he'd asked me earlier. He leaned back in his chair. You seem tense. I studied him carefully. The boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides. The teenager who once stayed up all night helping me repaint the living room after I'd had a difficult week. The young man who cried at his mother's funeral and held my hand so tightly I thought it might break. Where had that version of him gone? I need to ask you something, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. Okay, when you went to the service station earlier, what did you open? His face didn't change immediately. But something behind his eyes did. What are you talking about? A small packet, I continued evenly. What was it? He stared at me for 3 full seconds. Sugar, he said finally. Why? For whose drink? For mine. I nodded slowly. You didn't put anything in mine. Now his breathing changed. Just slightly. No. Why would I do that? There it was again. That careful tone. That measured calm. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Because someone saw you. Silence. The air between us thickened. Who? He asked. The server. His head turned subtly, scanning the room. She's mistaken, he said quickly. You know how people are. They see something small and make it into a story. Daniel. His name felt heavier than it ever had before. If this is some kind of joke, I continued, it's not funny. It's not a joke, he replied, too fast. Then tell me the truth. He swallowed. I watched his throat move. His hands were flat on the table now. You wouldn't understand, he said quietly. Try me. He looked down at the tablecloth. You said it yourself, he began slowly. That the house holds memories. I didn't like where this was going. What does that have to do with anything? He hesitated. I'm drowning, Dad. The words came out in a whisper. I thought this business thing was going to work. I really did, but it didn't. I owe money. More than I can handle. My chest tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to be a failure in your eyes. You could never. Yes, he interrupted softly. I could. His voice cracked for the first time that night. I found out something last month. About Mom's insurance policy. My heartbeat began to pound in my ears. What about it? There's a clause, he said carefully. If anything happens to you, it transfers to me. The world narrowed to just the two of us. I would never hurt you, he added quickly. I needed you to get sick. Just enough to go to the hospital. Just enough to buy time. The words didn't sound real. What did you put in my drink? I asked, my voice barely steady. He closed his eyes for a moment. Something mild. Something that would make you dizzy. Nauseous. That's all. That's all, I repeated. I wasn't going to let anything serious happen. I swear. I stared at him. You risked my health for money. His face crumpled. I panicked, he said. I felt trapped. I thought if you got hospitalized, I could step in, manage things, maybe convince you to sell the house. We could both start over. Both. He still thought this was something we could share. You should have come to me, I said quietly. I tried, he whispered. Every time I picked up the phone, I heard your voice in my head telling me to be strong. To stand on my own. I meant emotionally, I replied. Not alone. Tears were streaming down his face now. I didn't want to disappoint you. I looked at the glass sitting between us. Untouched. 26 years of bedtime stories. School plays. Broken bicycles I fixed at midnight so he'd wake up smiling. Every sacrifice I'd made without ever keeping score. And tonight, he'd nearly slipped something into my drink. Do you understand what you've done? I asked. He nodded weakly. I hate myself for it. Good, I said, not cruelly, but honestly. Because this doesn't just disappear. He flinched. I don't want to lose you, he said. Please. The desperation in his voice was real. Not calculated, not rehearsed, real, and that made it worse. You already did something, I replied slowly. Now the question is whether you're willing to rebuild. He looked up at me, hopeful, terrified. I'll fix it, he said. I'll tell them I don't want any claim. I'll figure out the debt. You're not fixing this with paperwork, I interrupted gently. You fix this by telling the truth. By asking for help before you break something that can't be repaired. I stood up. The server was watching from across the room, concern written all over her face. I left money on the table. Dad, Daniel said, standing too. Where are you going? I looked at him, really looked at him. You're coming with me, I said. We're going home, and tomorrow, we start cleaning this mess up together. He blinked. You're not cutting me off. You're my son, I replied. That doesn't stop tonight, but trust. I paused. That has to be earned again. He nodded, tears still falling. As we walked toward the door, I realized something heavy but undeniable. The betrayal wasn't the end of our story. It was the moment that revealed how fragile we'd both become without admitting it. Outside, the night air felt different. Colder, clearer. Daniel walked beside me in silence. For the first time in years, we weren't pretending everything was fine. And maybe that was where healing actually begins.